So in my time working on consoles and computers and handhelds, a lot of times at different stores, people would actually develop specialties that they were good at, whether it was a certain system or a certain repair. For example, it usually came down to me working on reballs for ball grid array chips, mostly because I ended up becoming very familiar with the machines that were used to do that. And you would think from there, that's basically all I would work on. However, there was always a certain set of systems that would come in that would usually end up being me working through them, mostly because I developed experience with those. And you would think it's something crazy, some insane system, something very expensive, and no, it was actually the 3DS. And what's odd about the 3DS is if you kind of look at it, it doesn't seem very complicated. I mean, sure, it's two screens and there's a hinge and everything, but for the most part, you look at this and see it as, well, a pretty standard basic system. However, when you actually start working on this, it becomes pretty clear why most places would kind of turn these away. So today we're going to go ahead and take this guy apart so I can show you some of the issues that people had with this system and show you why it was such a problem to work on. So this one in particular is the blue original 3DS. This might be some of the 3DS systems that you bought when it first came out. This would basically be one of the launch systems. I remember there was a blue and then there was also a black model. I ended up with the blue one here. So let's actually start taking this guy apart. And usually you start with the back where there are a couple screws that essentially hold down a plate that then covers up the battery. This is pretty straightforward. So if you have to do a battery replacement on one of these old 3DS systems because, well, the battery's just worn out or it's bubbled, you can usually see it actually pushing pressure here when it does that. It's pretty easy to get to this point. You just need a smaller Phillips head screwdriver and you can usually get right to it. This one has something sticky inside, I think. I don't know what that is. This is actually a used system that I picked up from GameStop, and this is actually for the joystick. I don't know why that's right there. I don't really know what that's about. It seemed clean on the outside. This is one of their recharged, refurbished systems. So that's interesting. I guess I'll hold on to this and put it where it belongs when we get to that point. Or maybe I just got a free cover for the joystick, so that's actually nice, I guess. Our battery is pretty simple. Remember, we've seen this battery before very recently. Remember, it was with the Pro Controller. So the battery life on the Pro Controller is good. The battery life on the original 3DS is not. So you get that's kind of the way it goes. Now we have a couple screws here to take out. All Phillips head, by the way. In fact, I don't remember having to use a tri-wing on this at all back in the day, which is nice. That was one of the things I liked about the 3DS, is that I don't remember having to take a tri-wing out for much on it. Whereas with like the DS Lite, that's all you would use just to get into the system, and then they would kind of change over to a Phillips head. You have to be very careful with these screws, by the way, because they strip very, very easily. You can kind of grind away the grip point for your Phillips head without any issue. So you want to be very careful if you decide to have to get into one of these with these screws in particular. Also, one screw located up here, it's a silver small screw. This one that I'm noticing is kind of stripped out, but this Phillips head, this screwdriver grabs that Phillips head pretty easily, so no issues there. This one also strips pretty easily. As long as you have like a smaller Phillips head driver like this one, like one from, you know, they sell those eyeglass kits. You could use probably one of those. This one actually came with, I believe, the Joy-Con locks in that kit, and it's actually been working pretty well for a lot of these smaller screws. So after getting all of those out, and then you have one black screw here in the center, this should actually pull up, and then you want to be careful because there is still clips, and this one might not have been plugged in or it just popped out. These are actually for the bumpers at the top, so your shoulder buttons is what that actually works for. And they're nice tactile clicks, something else I liked about the 3DS, and they all run through ribbon cables, all of which just plugs in. So if you have to replace them, also not too bad to replace. And once you put that to the side, you're kind of greeted with all kinds of stuff on the 3DS here. And we can kind of start to get into parts of this that were easier or harder to repair or replace. The nice thing is about the 3DS, a lot of the parts are modular, minus one thing, which is the power plug here. Otherwise, though, everything can be kind of pulled off and put back on to replace, whether it's your joystick, your SD card reader, the IR blaster, your Wi-Fi card, even the microphone. All of them can be replaced without too much issue. While we're here, very quickly before I start taking stuff off, one of the biggest failure points in the 3DS that I had to replace was this here. This is actually the charge port. And what ends up happening is as you plug and unplug your power cable, this becomes loose. The feet around the edges start to actually pull from the top of the PCB, and you can actually it's actually starting to happen with these 2 feet here. And I don't know if it's just because they didn't use enough solder or wasn't strong enough. And once those become loose, these center points start to become loose as well. And this whole thing can just kind of break off. Very easy to replace though with some minor soldering. And at that point, you're good to go. But it was something that I had to replace a lot. Was this charge port? Probably just because it was just weak. So we'll go ahead and pull the Wi-Fi chip right off there. Not an issue. Pops right off. And that goes to the side. Has an antenna that runs around. This antenna actually runs all the way to the top. It's actually located up here. So that's one thing that we're going to have to deal with that goes through the hinge. In fact, the hinge, while we're on that topic about the hinge, is the hardest part about this thing. If you notice, the screen is up here. The camera's up here, a Wi-Fi antenna's up here, your 3D slider. There's a lot of stuff going through a single hinge, and that is a problem. That's actually one of the things that would get sent my way a lot and that people would turn away, was having to work on anything top screen or top compartment related, because once you start doing that, well, you'll see. So the SD card slot comes off. It is technically taped/glued to this metal cover, and a lot of times the entire thing would just come off, right? And we'd get revealed a little chip under here. But usually this is supposed to stay there and it just kind of peels off, but it's not a big deal if it pops off, because you'll just have to separate it, and it just peels off. It's not a big deal. And then you can replace it. So if your SD card reader gets kind of mangled or messed up, it's not soldered to the board. You can just pop it off and replace it with a new one. You can see it's one of the first things that come off, just a couple screws that hold it down, and then you're pretty much in. There are 2 other screws underneath of here as well. They're 2 black screws, and they also hold the plastics underneath that SD card to the board and the plastic at the bottom. So we're going to take off the joystick now. If your joystick is an issue, again, it's one of the first things that come up. You just have to remember it uses 2 longer screws, okay? It doesn't use smaller screws. And once you pop this guy up and out, you'll have a couple of covers under here. You'll notice one of the covers is one of the ones that I actually took off right in the beginning that was under the battery compartment. So maybe I think they just gave me an extra one. I don't really know why that was in there, but it's not really a big deal. It wasn't hurting anything. It was just a little odd to see that in there. And then your joystick is free, which you can replace pretty easily. And then there is a clip here that it just pops off of. So again, easy to replace that, easy to replace the SD card, the Wi-Fi card, the microphone. All of this stuff is pretty much able to be replaced without having to open the top screen. Even the charge port can be done. Your IR blaster pops right off. That's one of the reasons I like the 3DS, was because it was very modular, very easy to replace things. We have 2 clips here. That's for the bottom screen. We have a cable for the screen itself, right? We also have a digitizer cable that is for the digitizer, which is our touchscreen essentially. So let's go ahead and remove both of those. I like that they're both located in the same spot, because on the DS Lite, you had one on the front, and then you had one that wrapped all the way around the top, and that was really annoying to put together. Then we have several cables up here. We have our 3D slider cable that we're going to take that off there. We have our camera and LCD cable. One is located on the other side of this board and the other on the opposite side. And that is one of the biggest issues, and you're going to see in a second why. First, though, we have to start unscrewing this board, which we don't have many screws. In fact, they're actually missing a screw here. Not the end of the world. It's not going to really affect much, but they did miss a screw there to put back in. But we'll just go ahead and remove these 3 screws, and we should be able to start lifting the board out. So the board's now out. You can see 3 cables, digitizer, LCD, backlight, all coming from the bottom screen. And then you can see right away another cable on the other side, right? So this is where people start to kind of lose it, is when you have to start removing this board completely. People start to get really frustrated, because putting it back together is a pain. Think about it this way. You have these cables here that have to all go back onto the board, right? But you have to put one on this side, push it down, and then put the others down while it's all laying down. It is not fun to do all of that, and believe it or not, that's not even the worst part of it. So now we've removed that, we can actually pull our screen up. This is our screen here for the 3DS, right? The digitizer is actually glued to the screen. We can actually remove that really easily. You can actually just pull it right off, believe it or not. So I'll go ahead and pull that off just so you can see it. There we go. So we have our LCD here and our digitizer. Now, if your digitizer is all scratched up, right, like you've been using it a lot, or your kid's been using it, and all of a sudden you want to play some 3DS games and it's all damaged and scratched up, you can order just this part for less than $10. Now, if you have to line it back up with the new one, it's actually a lot easier than you think. All you do is set this one in here, right? So we have our bottom there. You set that one in, and this actually works as a little bit of a guide to put it back together, because you set that one down, and then you have your LCD. You set that in there, and now you've actually already lined it up. So if I take this up, boom, it's lined back up. So it's not actually as hard as other people might. Some people might try to freehand it and try to figure it out, and kind of. You can actually just use this frame as a way to put it back together. So it just uses like basically sticky tape to do that. So we have our Wi-Fi antenna here that's going to pick up, and at this point we have our buttons that we can get to. So if your buttons are sticky, you can just peel these right off. There is our D-pad, right? You can throw this in some soapy water and it'll be cleaned up real nice. Same with these buttons. And we're starting to get to the top part now, where the hinges. So everything you've seen now is what we would have to go through if you've broken your top screen. So you can kind of start to see why people didn't like to do this. Now we're ready to work into the top screen, and to start doing that, we actually have to take these pads off to get started. These, of course, these pads help to keep this screen from actually hitting the bottom portion of it when you close it, but it also allows us to actually get into the system from the top. So we're going to go ahead and remove these guys. The reason we had to work in from the bottom here, one is to be able to plug the thing in when we pull because you have to pull the board out to do so, and two, it's going to help us get to the hinge. The hinge is actually what helps to hold everything together. So we've actually made a nice little entry point here at the top, and this entire black piece of plastic on the top is actually a sticker. Yeah, I'm not kidding. It's a plastic sticker that covers up a lot. So there's a few ways we can do this. You can either jam something in here that's plastic, right, like a card or something. We can also heat it to make it a bit easier. That's how I'm going to get this started. I'm actually going to heat the front a bit, and then I'm actually going to use a tool to start to pick this side up. So a little bit of heat, it actually makes it really easy to pull off. So I went ahead and just lifted it slowly, and it'll start to come up. If you can actually keep the glue on, which I almost did. I have a little bit up here around the camera. Otherwise, though, I managed to keep most of the actual tape on the top of this. It's much easier. But some of it being here isn't a big deal as long as I flatten it and try to line it back up. It shouldn't have any bubbles or points of force at the top there. And then this is our screen here with our two speakers. So again, we have a lot of stuff running through here, but now that we have this off, we can actually start to unscrew the top, and that'll make it easier to start getting into the top compartment. Okay, so about 5 screws out, 6 screws out. It lets us actually take this back point off, and here we are now, tons of cables on the top. As you can see, our 3D slider also has a chance to just fall out, by the way, so I recommend just taking it out instantly. Otherwise, if that drops and goes on the floor, it's gonna be really annoying to get to. And this is a lot of time where people go, nah, not for me, and it goes back up. There are cables running everywhere here. We have 2 speakers that have to run into our 3D slider cable, and that also has, what's that, the light on the top? Is that for like, yeah, that's for the light. We have a light on the top here, obviously, for, I believe, when the camera is activated there. So yeah, a lot of things going on here, and now we have to start looking at how we can separate the 2 ends. So I started to remove the 3D slider cable, just to, there we go, just to get this guy out. And that'll start to free the screen as well. But we also, like I said, have to start figuring out how we're going to free it from this side. And that's where something else gets really frustrating. I keep saying that too. It's going to get more and more frustrating. It's kind of because it is. So let me go ahead and pull this off here. We got 2 spots on the top for the cables to plug in. And that's for the screen itself. That's just for like the 3D effect, I believe, that it controls. Let me go ahead and pull that guy out there. There we go. And at this point, this is pretty much completely free. Your speakers are also magnetized, so they'll start jumping on the screen and sticking to it. So that's always fun as well to deal with. So there's a lot of stuff that fights you when you're doing this. Our camera at the top will actually come off at this point, if I can peel this back up with that piece of sticker that's there. The camera will come up, but it'll also just stick to the screen as well, which the screen should be to the point where I can free it. Again, a little bit of stickiness there with some tape, but now our screen is also free. So we're working pretty well here to get this guy apart. And again, this is kind of where you'll see people just go, nah, I'm not dealing with this anymore. Because you can see how many cables are just all over the place, right? I mean, look what I'm holding here. It looks insane. It's very intimidating for people who have not worked on a 3DS before or even attempted a console repair. I know a lot of people online I've seen that try to do these top screen repairs and just completely damage these cables. Here's our antenna up here. Remember, I also mentioned that there is an antenna at the top, and that runs all the way from that Wi-Fi chip at the bottom that I showed you guys earlier. It actually runs all the way around, down and underneath of the screen kind of in the plastics, and it also runs through the hinge, which now that we have this free, this will give us one less thing to have to deal with through that hinge, because technically we have we have three cables that are pretty much circled around basically to make it so it fits, and then they all have to come out this side in a particular order. Yeah, it's like that. We have this longer one coming first, then there's a black cable on top that comes next, and then we have the other cable that's more of a yellow cable at the bottom. Yeah, it's a whole thing. Okay, so now I managed to kind of push the hinge in on this side, and it's now free. So this side starts to kind of open up. You can actually see it when I start to move it. So that's now opened up, which is good because it'll now give us the ability to start moving our cables through and out, so we can basically separate the two pieces. Now, they're very nice to give us a nice little spot here. It's this little sliver in the plastic, and that allows us to essentially slide all of these cables through. So when this picks up and out, we'll slide these guys through, and that'll let us technically pull this out, but very carefully, because you can easily clip your cables. And that's, again, one of the things people do not like working on these for, is because the cables can be cut just because of the way Nintendo set this all up. So that's now out, right? And again, you can just see the mess here of wires, right, of cables. So look at all these cables here. And what's really funny is in order to strengthen this hinge, they added, if you look right there, this interesting little silver cylinder right there. And the idea there is to strengthen the hinge and where the plastics are. But what's really funny about that is it actually adds an extra dimension of danger, because that, believe it or not, can actually cut these cables. That's right, you can cut all of them. So I'm going to separate all of this. I'm going to take it all out, and it's a real pain to do so, but we're going to go ahead and do that here. And the best way to do that, if you're replacing your top screen, is to essentially kind of circle all of these together, right? And start to kind of wind them together. You can technically leave this one. This one doesn't have to come out if you're just doing your screen, right? So we take this guy out carefully, and you'll see it start to free, which is good. So we're good on that. These need to get out of the way, though, because they're magnetic and they keep sticking to everything. However, now that that's free, we're pretty much good there. So that's going to stay over here. Okay, and here is our top screen. Our top screen is now free. Our camera is still stuck to it. It's just pretty much just stuck to it. It's not a big deal. And then you want to wind them together in this order here. See how they're already kind of together with the, actually, let me get that, there we go. The black cable on top, and then the more yellowish cable on the bottom, with our camera cable and then our screen cable. And that's how it all goes together. And this is the biggest reason why no one likes to work on the 3DS. I noticed this, as many places just did not want to do anything with them. You can see just the amount of junk I have everywhere now. It's a lot. There's stuff everywhere. So it's not fun to work on. At this point, though, we've pretty much gone through all of the disassembly. I guess what we'll do now is put it all back together, because it's kind of a challenge anyway. So let's see if we can get this done fairly quickly. Oh, good, the battery's dead. All right, well, I'm gonna have to plug it in and then we'll test it. All right, so I let it charge up for a little bit, just long enough to get it to turn on and everything. So let's go ahead and power this guy on. Otherwise, though, it all went together pretty well. No issues there or anything. So it'll take a minute because I have not actually turned this on really at all. I haven't gone through the startup sequence after you format it, which, of course, GameStop formats all of these as they should. It looks good. So let's hit OK there. Let me turn the speakers up a bit so you can kind of hear it. There we go. So yeah, the speakers look good. 3D slider works fine. Everything looks good there. So this was actually a refurb from GameStop, and everything inside looked good. They even gave me a little extra sleeve by accident for the analog stick here that was packed under where the battery was. Yeah, everything looked fine though. It was, it's actually a good looking refurb, so I'm pretty happy with it. And you can kind of see now why I don't like working on these systems. Right? You can see it's not fun. But a lot of times I would end up working on them because so many places just wouldn't. There were other repair places around us in different areas, and none of them wanted to work on these. So yeah, I ended up probably, top screen wise, I probably ended up replacing over 100 top screens. Let me turn the speakers down for a minute. And yeah, it was not exactly fun, but after a while you get pretty good at it, and I was able to do a top screen in about 40 minutes of opening, putting the screen in, closing it up, and that's not too bad, I guess. So let me know what you guys think about the 3DS. Inside of the 3DS, you think it's a bit too complicated? Do you think Nintendo could have done a better job with it? And would you like to see me do something like the 3DS XL, the new 3DS XL? I did the 2DS XL a while ago. I wouldn't mind going back through and looking at it with the overhead camera and everything so you can get a better idea as to what it looks like. But let me know what you guys think about that down below. Make sure you like the video if you liked it, dislike it if not, and I'll see you guys in the next video.